Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. For Rosalyn, it wore the face of her father's closest friend. What began as silence and fear grew into years of hidden torment, until one confession to her mother shattered the secret forever. This is a story of pain, courage, and the power of truth to destroy even the darkest lies. Hi everyone. You are welcome to my channel. If you like our stories and similar infidelity stories, please do well to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. And if you are already a subscriber, thanks for stopping by, and do not forget to turn on your notification button so as to get notifications anytime we post our stories. Now let's dive into the gist. My name is Rosalyn, and I grew up in a small Oklahoma town where everybody knew everybody. Life was simple: church on Sundays, school during the week, and family dinners that smelled of cornbread and fried chicken. My father was a hard-working man, and his friends often came around. One of them, Mr. Harris, was always there. He had a way of smiling that made my parents trust him, and they never thought twice about leaving me around him. At first, I thought he was just being kind. He'd buy me candy, help me with homework, and tell me stories about when he and my father were younger. My parents thought he was a second uncle to me. But slowly, his kindness became something else. He would linger too long when he hugged me. His hand would brush against me in ways that made my skin crawl, though I didn't have the words to explain it then. As the months passed, he became bolder. The first time he crossed the line, I froze. I remember staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, wondering if anyone would believe me if I told. But he whispered in my ear, "Don't say a word. This is our secret." And in my innocence, I believed I had no choice. It didn't happen just once. It became a routine, a nightmare I couldn't escape. Days turned into years, and I learned how to smile in front of my parents while carrying a heavy secret. I wanted to tell someone, but every time I tried, the words caught in my throat. Silence became my prison. Mr. Harris knew it, and he thrived in that silence. To the world, he was my father's loyal friend. To me, he was the man who stole pieces of my childhood. But deep inside, I carried a small flame of hope that one day, the truth would come out, and his smile would fade. As I grew older, the secret grew heavier. By the time I turned 15, I no longer felt like a child, but I wasn't a woman either. I was stuck in between, carrying memories that no teenager should ever carry. My friends at school laughed about crushes and dances, while I walked around with a heart that felt like stone. Mr. Harris still came around, always wearing that same smile that fooled everyone. To my father, he was more than a friend, he was a brother. They hunted together, fixed cars together, and sometimes sat late into the night talking about life. Whenever I looked at him, I wanted to scream, "Do you know what your friend is doing to me?" But the words always died on my tongue. I was terrified. What if my father didn't believe me? What if he turned against me? Mr. Harris had warned me 1,000 times, "If you tell, no one will believe you. You'll ruin your family. You'll break your daddy's heart." And those words cut deeper than the things he did to me. There were nights I cried silently into my pillow, praying to God for strength. I began writing in a secret journal, the only place where I allowed the truth to exist. On those pages, I poured out my anger, my shame, my longing for freedom. If anyone had found that journal, they would have seen the truth written in shaky handwriting: "Mr. Harris is killing me slowly." But I wasn't completely invisible. My mother began noticing the shadows in my eyes. She saw the way I avoided being alone in a room with him, the way my laughter had grown rare. One night, as she folded laundry, she asked softly, "Rosalyn, is there something you're not telling me?" My lips trembled. I wanted to spill it all, but fear locked me up again. I shook my head, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Mama." But she didn't look convinced. The turning point came on my 17th birthday. Mr. Harris had been drinking, and his arrogance grew reckless. He cornered me in the kitchen while my parents were outside with guests. His voice was low and slurred. "You know you'll never tell. You need me." That night, I realized I couldn't carry the silence anymore. The weight was crushing me, and if I didn't speak, I would lose myself completely. A few days later, trembling, I walked into my mother's room. I closed the door and whispered the truth I had buried for years. The words tumbled out with tears, and once they started, I couldn't stop. When I finally lifted my head, my mother's face was pale with shock, her hands shaking as she held mine. She whispered one sentence that gave me courage I never had before. "Rosalyn, you are not alone anymore." The night my mother told my father was the night everything in our house cracked wide open. I remember sitting in the living room, my hands clenched in my lap, as Mama's voice shook while she spoke the words I had carried for years. She told me, "James, your friend, your brother, he's been hurting Rosalyn." For a moment, silence swallowed the room. My father's face went blank, as if his mind couldn't process the words. Then his eyes turned toward me. I nodded, tears streaming down my cheeks, unable to speak. The look on his face was one I will never forget. Pain, rage, betrayal. It was as if every bone in his body wanted to break. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over. "Where is he?" His voice thundered through the walls. Mama grabbed his arm. "James, please, think before you act." But my father wasn't hearing reason. His fists were already clenched, his face red with fury. For years, he had welcomed Harris into our home, trusted him around his daughter. And now he realized the man he called a friend was nothing but a wolf in sheep's clothing. That evening, my father stormed out of the house, heading straight to Harris's. I begged my mother not to let him go, terrified of what might happen. But she only whispered, "Your father has to face him. This can't stay hidden anymore." Later that night, word spread quickly through our small Oklahoma town. Neighbors heard the shouting. Some said they saw my father grab Harris by the collar, slamming him against the hood of his truck. Others whispered that Harris denied it, claiming I was making things up. But when my father raised his fist, Harris's mask slipped. The man who had threatened me for years suddenly looked small and afraid. When my father came back home, his hands were scraped, his shirt torn. He sat at the table, his head in his hands. "He won't touch you again," he said hoarsely. But I could see in his eyes that this wasn't enough. Because in a town like ours, rumors flew faster than the truth. Harris had friends, and some were already whispering that I had imagined it. The shame of being doubted settled heavy on me. But Mama didn't let me sink back into silence. "Rosalyn," she said firmly, "this is bigger than us now. We're going to the police. That man will answer for what he's done." For the first time in years, I felt something new rising inside me, not just fear, but fire. I was tired of being his secret. Tired of carrying his sin like it belonged to me. It was time for the whole world to know what Harris really was. Walking into the police station that morning was one of the hardest things I had ever done. My knees shook, my throat felt dry, but Mama held my hand firmly as if to remind me I wasn't walking in alone. My father walked ahead of us, his shoulders broad, carrying both anger and shame. I told my story. Every detail I had buried for years came out, one trembling word after another. The officers listened, and for the first time in my life, I felt like my voice mattered. They took my statement, wrote down dates, asked questions. And then, they sent a squad car for Harris. When he was arrested, the town buzzed. Some neighbors were shocked, others pretended they had always suspected. A few tried to defend him, saying he was a good man who couldn't possibly do such a thing. But those words couldn't change the truth anymore. Court days were long and heavy. I had to sit there, facing the man who once silenced me with threats. He looked smaller now, his arrogance replaced with desperation. His lawyer tried to twist my story, but I didn't falter. Each time I spoke, I reminded myself, I'm not the child he controlled anymore. I'm the voice he tried to bury. When the verdict finally came, it was like a storm breaking. Harris was sentenced, handcuffed, and led away. My father sat beside me, tears running down his face. whispering, "I should have protected you sooner." But I looked at him and said, "Daddy, you did protect me," when I finally had the courage to speak. The town never looked at Harris the same again. His Waterloo had come, and it was swift and final. As for me, healing wasn't instant. There were nights I still woke up shaking, mornings when shame tried to creep back in. But every time, I reminded myself of the girl I once was, the girl who carried silence like a chain, and the woman I was becoming, one who turned pain into power. Now, when I tell my story, it's not just for me. It's for every girl who ever thought her voice didn't matter. I want them to know, secrets lose their power when spoken aloud. And for Harris, and men like him, there will always be a day of reckoning. Because monsters may hide for a while, but sooner or later, truth will always find them. Have you heard or experienced similar situation? Please tell us how you handle it in the comment section, and do not forget to turn on your notification button so as to get notifications anytime we post our stories. Thank you and see you in my next video.